Hello, everyone, and welcome to SiGMA Roadshow Manila edition. To our viewers, thank you for taking the time to join us in today's panel. I'm very excited to be with three industry experts who have come together to discuss about the future outlook of the gaming industry in Asia, Europe, and the US, which suffered greatly during the height of the pandemic. Despite that, we are hoping that 2021 and beyond will prove to be normal. Moreover, our panelists today will be presenting very valuable information with regards to the necessary convergence for land-based casinos and online gaming operations moving forward. I will be pleased to introduce to you Alex Cohen, who is joining us from Spain. He is the CEO and co-founder of the European-based online gaming supplier, Kalamba Games. Also, we have Tong, who is joining us from Hong Kong. He's the co-chairman of Hong Kong Blockchain Association, and he is also the vice chairman of Macau Gaming Information Association, or MGIA. Last but not least, we're having Calvin Lim joining us in the panel. He is calling from Manila. He's the president and CEO of DFNN. So welcome, gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to have you all. Now, my first question is for you, Tony. Could you tell us about the current and near future outlook for Macau land-based gaming? Are we seeing more people from mainland China and Hong Kong heading back to Macau to play?
Well, as you know, because of the pandemic situation, Macau really took a very, very big hit. Every place was locked down, but gradually now Macau, as the COVID-19 is all in control, so Macau is getting ready to open up. So the visitors from China, especially in Guangdong province, the neighboring province, they are getting ready to enter Macau. Hong Kong is still suffering from the COVID-19, so Macau is not opening up to Hong Kong people yet. But I think more and more people are going to be vaccinated, and so there will be like a green health code once you're vaccinated, and then you have to get some certification. And I think within a few months, I think more and more people will be able to go to Macau from Hong Kong, Guangdong, and all over China. So I'm pretty confident that the visitors will return to Macau by the end of this year.
Thank you, Tony. And similar question goes to you, Alex, but more focused on Europe and online.
Well, in Europe, it varies one country to another, but in some of the larger gaming markets, casinos are still closed with no immediate plans to reopen them. So the online gaming industry has it's benefited from a shift in player habits that people who are looking for a gambling experience, they'll turn online. And I think it coincides that I think a lot of European countries were a little bit behind the curve in, say, Asia or in Northern Europe or in the US in terms of adoption of e-commerce. And COVID forced that people had to do a lot of habits where they were used to going downstairs and walking out the street. It forced them to pick that up online. And so there's been a greater adoption of say online habits than there had been prior to the pandemic. And we see that because a lot of the companies that have a land-based presence in Europe also have an online presence, they've taken their user base and then just tried to reach them online. So we've seen quite a big spike in gaming activity overall, but most of it has been online and mostly at the expense of land-based.
All right, thank you, Alex. Now I'd like to turn over to Calvin. How long do you see it taking for land-based casinos to get back on track with revenue and traffic flow?
Well, specifically for the Philippine markets, I think it's important for us to understand a little bit of the history. The two main moving parts that we have is the circuit breakers, and of course, is the subsequent one is the inoculation. So fortunately, we have some form of data where the first wave of at the peak of the pandemic, where the government introduced a series of community quarantine measures, from no operation to limited capacity to age restrictions. I guess one can argue that it has been working because the cases went down. Again, from the first wave, middle of 2020, where there's 7,000 cases, to I think 3 months later, we're looking at a few hundred cases a day. And of course, it's correlated. The more stringent the quarantine measures are, the lesser reported cases. And of course, the more looser the quarantine measures are, the higher the case. And it took 7 months from the first wave to the second wave. And the second wave, the peak was about 2 weeks ago. The infection rate actually doubled from 7,000 on the first wave to 15,000 reported cases in a day. And to bring that down to 3-digit infection, I guess the safe assumption that it will take similar time frame, if not longer. So that puts us at about the end of third quarter, if not early fourth quarter of this year. So simultaneously, the inoculation, a bit of numbers, we have about 1 million first dose of vaccine. And the plan for the government is to have 70 million people vaccinated by end of this year. So that means 140 million vaccines. There was a tripartite deal between the government, private sector, led by Mr. Ricky Razon. Someone needs to give him a medal, and Moderna, to bring in 20 million vaccines. I'm actually proud to announce that DFNN was a part of this private sector group. When it comes to the whole vaccination process, unfortunately, we don't have enough data to understand like for example, the side effects of the vaccine. We have some form of reports elsewhere, for example, and the other examples are like a new strain being reported, and the logistic issues that in Philippines might face. So giving some form of allowance of the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns, I would say in order to achieve the target of 70 million people being vaccinated, we're looking at easily first quarter of 2022. Maybe you want to extend it a little bit further, second quarter of 2022. And if we think and feel that history is the best predictor for the future, it's basically a race of time, right? So it's either we reach herd immunity first or the third wave. So fingers crossed. And so I guess that's basically second quarter of 2022 is where we see land-based gets back on track. And hopefully the regulation for international travel will also be relaxed by then. The kicker to it is that Philippines elections will take place in May 2022. So that's going to be a very interesting 2 years or 24 months in the Philippines.
Yes, exactly. Well, fingers crossed indeed. Thank you, Calvin. Now, how are land-based casinos changing their approach to online gaming in Asia, Europe, and the US in response to COVID? And are these attitudes or approaches that are emerging and we're seeing temporary or permanent? Could we start with you, Alex?
Sure. Well, I think it varies a lot by geography, of course. I think that in the US, we've seen what was a bit more of a stagnant market in terms of, or stagnant regulatory environment that was stalemated for about 10 or 15 years, all of a sudden coming to life because a lot of state governments that had depended on tax revenue from land-based gaming all of a sudden found that that was not coming in. And it made some corporations that were dependent on land-based casinos but had been worried about cannibalization from online casinos a lot more receptive to online gaming overall. And it made a lot of state governments that had been, say, reluctant to adopt regulations that they didn't fully understand. They were more willing to approach that in the context where this tax revenue that they had been counting on suddenly dried up. So within the past year and a half, we've seen a number of states in the US start falling like dominoes to approve regulated online sports betting, and a number of them are following with online casino as well. We see that in Europe, there was a much greater cross-selling from companies that had land-based and an online presence. So for example, in Italy, where casinos have been shut since March of last year, there was a large shift by the same companies that have their player base that they know from the land-based casinos. They just shifted them online, and companies that had that major online presence were able to keep their revenue pretty stable because of that. So we see that that's a bit of a trend in Europe, that a lot of land-based casinos that had not really adopted online gaming are turning to it out of a business need now. And we see that in Asia to some extent as well, that there are some casinos in Philippines that are turning to online gaming and approaching online gaming regulation because it's what they need to do in order to keep their business running.
All right, and how about for Asia, Tony? What are your thoughts?
I think overall, more and more people are playing games and other gaming online. But in Macau, because the regulation, the gaming law in Macau only allows land-based gaming. For online, there's only the Macau Jockey Club that has a monopoly. And same in Hong Kong, there's no other form of gambling that's legal other than Hong Kong Jockey Club. In China, likewise, there's only China Welfare Lottery and China Sports Lottery. In fact, Chinese government has stepped up its enforcement ban against online gambling. There's been a lot of arrests and freezing of accounts related to online gambling. So while the trend is definitely more and more players are moving online, but due to the regulatory issues, I think that it's hard to see official numbers because the biggest market is China, and China certainly has has stepped up its ban against online gambling. So I think all the operators in China that are targeting the mainland Chinese, have to be more careful.
All right, thank you. And Calvin, could you comment on the above?
Yeah, I think it's quite consistent as what Alex mentioned. Each country has its own forms of transition and moving towards the online side of things. The trick to it, while delicately balancing the pandemic, is to have regulation, right? And of course, after regulation comes enforcement, and it's very difficult for the especially in the Philippines, specifically the regulators, to enforce like gray markets, for example, or offshore operators, as in offering their kinds of platform or games in Philippines. So in that aspect, it's basically a real challenge. But other than that, I think it's inevitable. The whole transition of or the whole focus of moving into the online side of things is here. It's the pandemic actually accelerated the whole need to digitalize a lot of different segments. However, moving forward after post-pandemic, I suppose, I strongly believe, and similar with around the world, both land-based and online is here to say this two ecosystems has coexisted for many years, and it will coexist because of the whole different, well, if you want to go through target market, the whole target market is different players, different kind of needs and mindset altogether. So yeah.
All right, thank you for your insights. I'd like to move on now with the next question. Has the pandemic changed the balance of online versus land-based casinos and the player habits? Can we hear what Tony has to say first?
As I mentioned earlier, I think more and more games, sports betting, casual games, and online games are definitely coming up, and the younger generation are much more interested in all different forms of online gaming, including esports and casual games. And also with the bull market in the cryptocurrency, we're seeing more and more people are using new forms of payment that are involving cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin Casino, other tokens using Ethereum or USDT stable coins. We're seeing more and more games and gaming using cryptocurrency as payment. And I'm seeing also some new games are using the websites, gaming operators are using blockchain technology to validate the fairness of the game. So they're using a provable fair game, PFG technology, that's enabled by blockchain technology. So there's as people shift their plays from land-based to online, the biggest issue is how do you ensure the fairness of the game. And when you have a central authority, the players always are very suspicious of the central authority, the gaming operator, of playing tricks with the game. I know the Chinese players are very suspicious about that kind of cheating. So I know that there are new games coming out using a blockchain and provable fair game (PFG) technology to prove the fairness of the game, and I think that would, if that would allow the players to feel more comfortable, and they can move their plays online.
All right, thank you. And Calvin, what are your observations?
Well, one of the significant introduction at both what Tony and Alex mentioned in terms of introduction of a new game, and this is specifically very unique in the Philippines, but perhaps you might find this in other South American countries, is the legalization of an online version of cockfighting, or e-sabong. And that basically, it's a very huge market. It's traditionally it's done in a arena, and now because of the lockdown, the pandemic, you're not able, the customers or the players are able to go to the arena itself. Everything is all shifted online. So that itself is a huge market, and that technology behind it itself is something to marvel and for. Again, for me, it's all about the regulation and enforcement, which is going to be very, very interesting and challenge. And again, a very delicate balance between juggling the safety and health concern of the pandemic, as well as to generate revenues for the regulator and the government.
All right, thank you. And Alice, could you add on to that?
Yeah, I think. I mean, I say this from more of a perspective in Europe, where there are some countries where e-commerce adoption was very low, or relatively low, before the pandemic. I have to think that the habits that people have adopted of doing things online that they weren't used to doing, going to see a doctor instead of physically going to make an appointment, people are getting more used to having a video call with the doctor, for example. I have to think that that sort of transition is something that's going to be permanent, that people will have adopted a bit more online lifestyle where they might not have done it before. I think for geographies like the US and in Asia, where online adoption was pretty high to begin with, I think it's more a matter of acceptability and trust in online gaming operators. And I think if you have an environment where everything is operating illicitly, then yeah, it doesn't really engender a lot of trust. But as there's more regulation passed, then it does build a lot more trust. It allows people to sign on and have a bit more confidence and trust that if the operator has been approved by the regulator, then they're probably legitimate.
All right, and Alex, I'd love for you to answer if the boom in blockchain had affected either online or offline going forward as we return to normal. Will it be a standard part of payment and moving money for casino play going forward too?
I don't know. I think there are two things that need to happen with blockchain in order to become a bit more standardized as payment. One is that I think the regular banking system probably has to adopt it as a regulated norm. Because we've seen in a lot of countries that have regulated online gambling that they require it to be done in a specific currency because they want to have some control over it. If they have control over the banking system, they want to have control over the deposits and withdrawals from a casino as well. So it presents a challenge there for the more stricter regulated markets to adopt blockchain into their environment. For more agile regulated environments, then I think it does become something that will form a piece of the puzzle. That you have a lot of online players who become more and more used to having a wallet in cryptocurrency and performing actions with that, and so they'll want to use that to go and play online.
All right, Calvin, what do you think about this?
Well, it's mostly depending on jurisdiction and the need to adopt blockchain as a form of, I'm coming from the form of payment, deposit and withdrawal. So while the less, I would say, unregulated jurisdiction where there is no form of online gaming. So yeah, perhaps there might be a need in terms of adopting blockchain and cryptocurrency. But whereas for the adaptation of cryptocurrency as a payment for online regulated parkour, it's yes, I see a need, but it's very challenging because on one hand, it's regulated by parkour for the online side of gaming, and then on the other hand, when it comes to payment, it's regulated by the central bank. So it requires I would say, government agencies to work very closely. Yes, so that's basically it.
All right, thank you, Calvin. Now we'd love to hear what Tony has to say in response to that.
Well, in Macau, it's very strict. As I mentioned, the gaming law is still purely land-based. And in fact, we see one of the biggest gaming operators, junket operators, that starts with the sun. They've announced that they can only focus on land-based. They announced publicly that they're gonna dislink from any online gaming activities because of the Chinese central government's enforcement against ban against online gambling. So several of the gaming operators that are related to Macau, they have public announcement that they are only doing land-based and they are not going to do any online. But meanwhile, we have seen many other that are gray market. They are still expanding to Southeast Asia and the Philippines, Vietnam, Cambodia, and other Pacific islands. They have acquired gaming license in various jurisdictions, and they're offering online, and they're accepting various forms of cryptocurrencies as payments. So blockchain can be used to ensure the fairness of the game with the provable fair game technology. As far as payment, Chinese government is also rolling out its central bank digital currency called DCEP, DCEP, currently in trial in 4 cities in China, like Shenzhen and Chengdu, Hangzhou, and so on. And we believe that within a year, this will be rolled out to many different cities. And actually, also Hong Kong is going to be testing the central bank digital currency. So that's it. Yeah. So I think the Chinese government, they of course they're going to control the only official government approved payment is the DCEP, and the Chinese government does not allow other forms of cryptocurrency payments.
All right, thank you. And with regards to the new procedures that players are seeing happening or will happen as part of the new normal, besides face masks, chipless play, social distancing tables, vaccine passport requirements, are there any more besides these? Calvin, what do you think?
I think one area is perhaps a vaccine passport that allows, if the government allows, immigration allows those that is vaccinated, and the passport is recognized by both countries to allow the, I would say, some forms of tourism that includes going to the casinos and so forth. Other than that, we have seen it all. Face mask, as you mentioned, chipless play, social distancing tables. You have tables where it is segregated by an acrylic and it's limited to 3 players per table. So I think the next thing will be the introduction of the vaccine passport.
And Alex, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think it will be interesting to see what happens. I can see that in some jurisdictions, for example, the US, there's some states where there's quite a lot of aversion to the idea of a vaccine passport. Florida, for example, the governor said that they would never issue those. Then you have in Europe, where I think casinos are pretty far down the list as far as reopening priorities, but a lot of countries in Europe already do ID checks when you enter into a casino. So I think that it's not a huge extension to have, for example, a vaccine passport check as soon as you go to enter a casino.
And how about you, Tony? What do you think?
The travel bubble that's been in discussion by Hong Kong and Macau among the surrounding countries' jurisdictions, I think that's going on, and I think uh, in a few months or before the end of this year, I think that's going to open up. So people, I think, will be able to travel within Asia. So I think that will be good for the land-based side. Uh, I think for online gaming, that is the big trend. People are spending more time online. They are working from home. They are also playing from home from their mobile phones and computers, and they are spending more time dealing with cryptocurrencies. Uh, that's like another big gaming market because it's very exciting. I know a lot of these high value players from China. They used to think online games, online baccarat slot machine was exciting. Now that they're betting millions of dollars on up and downs of Dogecoin and Bitcoin, that's even more exciting than going to Macau.
All right, and Tony, in your opinion, which region is or are far ahead from others in terms of normalcy, and can you give examples?
I think Macau will return to normalcy very quickly. I think within this year, and Chinese people, visitors will be traveling to Macau, and that's for the mass market. But for the high-end VIP market, it's still difficult for people to move money because the Chinese government has stepped up its monitoring on currency, foreign currency restriction, and the foreign currency control. So I think the number of visitors will go to Macau, and the mass market gaming in Macau will grow rapidly, but the VIP gaming will shrink in Macau.
And Calvin, what are your observations?
Well, I think in my answer to the earlier question, we're looking at normalcy about middle of 2022. As what Tony mentioned, if you're looking at the VIP customers, if there is a form of recognition to allow them in with a vaccine passport, or if not, some form of ID, then yeah, if not, then we're looking at least 2022, middle, if not third quarter next year.
And Alex, what do you think?
I think it will vary a lot by geography. I mean, if we're talking about Europe in particular, I think that, well, the vaccine rollout is much slower than had been anticipated. And I think we're still, I mean, for example, in Spain here, we're still in some lockdown where we can't move from one area around our city to another without justification. So I think to some extent this will become the new normal for some countries for the next few years, depending on what their rollout and their approach is. So I think as economies begin to adjust to having that environment, then it starts to seem a lot more regularized. And I think, for example, in countries in Europe where the same casino had a land-based presence and had an online presence, they might not be feeling as much pain to reopen their casinos because they're still able to gain the same revenue, get the same players, and retain them a bit better even by approaching them online.
All right, thank you. And Tony, when do you think we anticipate Macau and Singapore and the others not to require the 14 days quarantine?
Macau, I think, will be open up to the surrounding cities like Guangdong province without quarantine within about 2-3 months. As long as you have a health passport with a mobile code, you can enter Macau without the 2 or 3 weeks of quarantine. But that's only open to the mainland Chinese. For Hong Kong, they will be based on the Hong Kong's overall number of cases, but I think will be gradually opened up. But for other countries, I think that it's going to be longer before they are allowed to go into Macau without quarantine.
All right, thank you. Can we hear the last say from Calvin?
Sorry?
can we hear the lastly from you? When do you think Macau, Singapore, and the others will not require anymore the 14 days quarantine, as this period can really discourage the casual players to travel to these destinations?
Yeah, I think the example I can give is like, for example, Taiwan. Do they not only require the 14-day quarantine, but they have a 7-day self-health management where you have to stay at home. If you leave your home, you need to wear your mask. And that is to ensure that they have zero domestic transmission, and they've managed it very well. I think any country who is able to achieve that zero transmission, then you'll see some form of movement here and there. Other than that, it's herd immunity. Vaccination gets rolled out, and once any jurisdiction or country achieves that, then yeah, we will see back the new normal back again. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Fantastic. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Unfortunately, we have exceeded our time, but nonetheless, this was a great opportunity to be able to sit down with you all. I hope this will be of resource to our audience. So thank you very much again for a great discussion, Alex, Tony, and Calvin. And to our viewers, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next panel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yanni. Thank you, Calvin and Alex.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Calvin, I hope to see you in the Philippines.